Hello, I am Day 9, and welcome to Steal This Build number 4, Liquid Tyler's Protoss vs. Protoss. Per usual, we will be discussing the build order with the following 3 categories. Number 1, the guiding principles of the build. Number 2, the opening of the build. And number 3, the deviations that can go on within the build. For any of you who haven't watched the previous ones, this is what I mean. Guiding principles are the overall ideas and themes that will guide you no matter what point you are at. Something like, I want to have 5 barracks and 2 bases and a lot of medevacs doing drops. No matter what point you're at in the opening, whether it's gone horrifically or amazingly, you are guided to this point. Number 2, the opening. The opening is the specifics, the real details of the start of the game. Things like 10 pylon, 10 gateway, ultra specifics that will help us optimize our mid-game or optimize versus some defense. And the last one, deviation, would of course be something like, now normally you'd want to build a zealot, but just this weird situation is going to have us build a sentry instead. I'm going to talk all about that. Now today we're going to be looking at Liquid Tyler's Protoss vs. Protoss build that was actually founded on a Protoss vs. Protoss opening that I worked on for a very long time. So this is going to enable me to talk about it in quite a lot of depth. This is going to be more focused on the opening part. But let's think about Protoss vs. Protoss in the way it was pre-patch. This is when warp gates were 140 seconds, so it was really easy to get a bunch of units to your opponent's base early, and the 4 warp gate was scary. That was like paramount, 4 warp gates. So my goal was, how can I deal with a 4 warp gate? That was what I was thinking. And I wanted to deal with it in some way that gave me a different kind of edge. Because the way that 4 warp gators would traditionally battle other 4 warp gators is with a probe advantage. The traditional classic 4 gate was 20 probes, and then you'd stop building probes, and then you'd 4 warp gate very quickly. 20 probes. So when it was 2 4 warp gators against each other, one of them would say, I am at 21 or 22 probes, and that's the way I'm going to get the advantage. But I wanted to sort of sidestep all that. So what my thinking was, is I want to try to go for a fast robotics facility, get an immortal up, and try to hold on with 2 gateways and a robo, and 20 probes. Well, what is the advantage that I'm going to be getting? Well, the advantage, as we're going to see in this build, is that I'm not going to have a 3rd and 4th gateway. Have you ever seen a 4 warp gator? He goes all in, he goes crazy, and then after the 4 warp gate doesn't win, maybe he'll go for a robo, maybe he'll go for blink, but this 3rd and 4th gateway, sometimes even the 2nd gateway, can't produce anything. It's dead money. It's just a building sitting there doing nothing. So I wanted to have a very lean set of buildings in my base, all producing structures that would always work. So the way that I wanted to try to get this functioning properly, this opening, was to get an immortal out as quickly as possible. And I tried a lot of things, and we're going to see a whole lot of stuff when I demonstrate the build myself. But first I wanted to show you something that might be a little eye-opening for what I call very thin openings. Let's go back to StarCraft 2 now, and look at this game that I did, where you're going to see me do something interesting. I'm only going to have 1 probe mine. I'm going to send the other probe to go off to do a little bit of scouting. So here we are. We have our probe. He's marching off. He's doing as much mining action as he can because that is what he was born to do. He's a very good probe. And what we're interestingly going to note is that this guy started mining at 5 seconds. I tried to time it quite nicely. And then we're going to see, oh my goodness, he mines about 40 or 45 minerals per minute. Now, what's going on down here? I sent a probe down to the bottom left corner, and he's just going to scout, and he's going to come right on back. He literally is doing a circuit. I make him do a little bit extra, but then I send him right on back. Yes, go to the watchtower, little probe. And what we're going to see is, bum-ba-da! If you send out a scout worker and just march it straight to the opponent's base and march it straight on back, and you know exactly where he is, as is the case on Xel'Naga Caverns, you end up losing 100 minerals. Even if you just send it out and get to his base, you lose about 50 minerals. What this means is that if you are not being really, really, really careful about when you're sending out scout probes, when you're having probes switch from mining minerals to mining gas, you can end up in situations where you don't feel like you have as much money as you potentially could have. You'll be in a situation where you'll have 75 minerals, and you'll think, well, I guess I can only afford maybe another probe. But if you'd sent that scout probe out later, you'd have 150 minerals, and you could go, oh, now I can build a gateway. This is something that I call ultra-thin openings. Openings that have extremely precise timings. Ultra precise timings. To the point where if you mess anything up in the slightest, you'll die. It's going to be really, really rough. But if you do everything perfectly, which, by the way, you can do, I believe in you, then you can end up in these very, very, very nice situations. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this build in depth, and I'm going to be explaining a lot of things as we go along. Let me first note the following. When I initially tried this build, my initial thought process was, allow me to get an immortal as quickly as possible. So that way I can begin stockpiling some immortals to hold off a scary, scary 4 warp gate. But what I found very quickly is that any early pressure at all, with one zealot, if they just took their first zealot and sent it, if they took their first zealot and first stalker and sent it, took their first zealot and first 2 stalkers and sent it, all 3 of those would kill me. So I threw that out the window quite quickly. I also want to note one more thing. This opening that we're about to see took me about 25 hours of work to finally crack. I don't want to say to discover, because it was a process of carefully shaving and tweaking and adjusting, and you're going to see a lot of those as we go in. But yeah, I want to emphasize the fact that a lot of times if you have a hard problem to crack, like how do I hold the 4 warp gate when cybernetics cores take 140 seconds to build a warp gate, yeah, then it can take some time, and that's okay. So we're going to jump right into it, and here is me. Bum-ba-dum-ba-da. So first what we're going to see is I'm going to be going for a 10-gate opening, because I want to get my cybernetics core out relatively fast so I can begin a robotics facility relatively quickly. And I also want to start my warp gate quite quickly, because what we're going to see is that it ends up not quite just being immortals that help me stay alive against a warp gate, but also sentries. So now all of a sudden I need a lot of gas for my sentries, I need a relatively fast robotics facility, I need a relatively fast warp gate. And I need to not have my build be totally transparent, because in my practicing against Tyler, who helped me quite a bit with this build, if he saw me get a warp gate really fast, he would literally immediately go air, and there was very little that I could do about that. So let's go ahead and continue to note that I went for a 10 pylon, 10 gate. I did chrono boost once before then, because I need those 10 probes out, because again, as you saw in the demonstration where I had 1 probe mine back and forth, getting one of these probes a little bit earlier due to that chrono boost ends up giving me a handful of extra minerals. My probes end up being stupid, and a lot of them go behind. But, you know, that's fine. It's not going to mess me up that much. I'll maybe be 10 minerals short in a couple places. Now, immediately note, I am not chrono boosting. That is deliberate, because watch this. I can build a simulator on 11, and then look at my money. Look, I can finish this probe. Boom. I've so far had non-stop probe production, and now I can chrono boost. I was actually scratching my nose, so I had to chrono boost with my mouse. That's why it wasn't perfectly lined up. But, now I can chrono boost, and I have had perfect efficiency on the second chrono boost. If I chrono boost right away and try to do an assimilator on 11, I end up with a long period where I'm not building any probes. If I try to build the assimilator on 12, I'm not going to have enough gas for what I want to do. So it actually ends up being very, very, very close. But still, we just simply hold off on that chrono boost for a little bit. For now, I am done chrono boosting probes. Completely done. Not going to be doing any more probe chrono boosting for the remainder of the game. Or shall I say for the remainder of the opening. So, I'm waiting for my warp gate to finish. We're going to see some touches come up in a moment. Now notice I'm getting a relatively early cybernetics core. It's going to be on 15. 2 minutes and 30 seconds to begin that cybernetics core. That's quite early. So, at this point, I'm just going to be building probes, and we're going to see some more weird things arise. Pylon, that's not unusual at all. Alright, we're going to see our cybernetics core finish in just a moment. Still building probes, have not cut any probes yet. And then, So right here, I have 61 energy. I'm going to be chrono boosting my Stalker and my Warp Gate. Now, this is actually a bit of advice that Liquid Tyler gave me. He said that you really should be getting this Stalker out very quickly, because thus far, I look very much so like I'm going to be doing some big, heavy Warp Gate pressure. And at the very least, when I get the Stalker out so fast, I can be a big bully. I can push his probes back, make sure he's not trying to build any pylons that near my base. What we're going to see with this build is that with my timing, I'm going to just barely get sentries and immortals up in time for 4 warp gate. It's going to be at about 5 minutes and 45 seconds. The fastest possible warp gates will generally arrive at around 5:45. But if his pylon's just a little bit far back, suddenly I have 5 or 10 seconds of time to leisurely enjoy my ramp with a martini. And 5 seconds might not feel like that much. With a thin build, oh, it's a lifetime. And it's going to end up being wonderful, wonderful, wonderful timing. We're going to enjoy it quite a bit. Whoopsie daisies, you crazy overlay. Get out of there. So now I'm going to do something that's going to look quite weird. Here comes a gas geyser. This is very unusual. Almost always you'll see more gateways go down, or you will see some sort of tech structure go down. This is a very weirdly timed gas to be getting it after the cybernetics core is done and after the Stalker is started, but that's fine. And now we're going to build one more probe. Here's one, and we're going to build one more. And then what we're going to end up doing is we're going to stop that probe production. Now, I'm also going to take this 25 energy. I'm going to go ahead and chrono boost my cybernetics core one more time, because I want to get my cybernetics core up as quickly as possible, because remember, I want my really, really lean buildings out. That's one reason why I want this. I don't want to have a lot of units being produced out of just regular old gateways, because I want that fast speed from the warp gate, so that way I can spend my money faster with 2 warp gates, as opposed to spending it slower with 3 regular gateways. And also, there's this weird threshold point where, like, I want a sentry out as fast as I can. And is it better to build a sentry, and then when the sentry's at like 80%, then the warp gate finishes, and then that sentry finishes, and then I morph to a warp gate? Or is it better to have a period of time where my warp gate's doing nothing? And in that nothing period, I'm just sort of waiting for my warp gates to finish. As it turns out, the nothing period, where you just kind of wait, ends up being slightly better through a lot of testing. But that was pre-patch. I don't quite know about this 160-second warp gate timing. But that's okay. We're going to see me discuss that once we get to the deviation portion of it. So I'm going to put 3 guys in the gas, and see, here's my robotics facility going down. I'm still building probes, and then here's another very weird timing. I'm going to build this Zealot, and this is going to be a very, very weird time to build a Zealot. But I'd like to note that a lot of players will build, doing a normal build, will go Zealot, and then when the Cybernetics core finishes, they build a Stalker. The only way you can actually defend a 1 Zealot, 1 Stalker attack early on is by building this Zealot yourself. Another very weird looking thing. I'm building this 3rd pylon before I'm building a gateway. What I can tell you, though, is it just works out very nicely. This just ends up being the timing you need to do, and now I'm going to build my 2nd gateway. Doesn't this look weird? I'm also doing a 3rd chrono boost on my warp gate. Ordinarily, this is the key chrono boost that lets you get the 140-second upgrade just in time. But obviously, we're not pre-patch. So there's my Zealot that ends up finishing. You'll see that in about 20 seconds, I would have finished my warp gate, and I would have begun morphing in a sentry. The sentry is actually going to get there at 5 minutes and 15 seconds, which is very, very early. That's in the old patch. In this patch, it still ends up working all right. So what we're going to see now is, here comes my robotics facility. Now, technically, I actually think I can sneak in a sentry here, but I wanted to do the build exactly as it was originally done, because I know all the justifications for everything. So there is the Immortal coming out. Notice that I don't quite have enough energy for the Immortal, but we're going to see it work out okay. First, what... no, there's actually nothing else interesting going on. I've stopped at 20 probes, and we're going to reach a point in time here. Yeah, see, here we go. I'm going to have enough energy to chrono boost this cutie. See, there it is. And even though I didn't chrono boost it right when it started, it will still have a full time length's worth of chrono boost devoted to the Immortal. I hope I'm going to be clear on this one. If I have a Colossus and I say start chrono boosting right as it begins, or actually let me choose some. What is a better unit? Let's say we have an imaginary unit that takes 100 seconds to build. And if I chrono boost it right when it starts building, that will shave 10 seconds off. So it will now finish in 90 seconds rather than 100 seconds. No matter where I chrono boost it, as long as it's kind of close to the start, the total build time will still be 90 seconds. If I chrono boost at 0 seconds, or 10 seconds, or 20 seconds on my 100 second long unit, that still is going to mean that I have a perfectly efficient chrono boost, and it's still going to pop out at exactly the same time. That's kind of a subtle key. I hope I explained that clearly. But the fact that I didn't chrono boost this immortal right when it started is still going to be okay. We're still going to note that it works out nicely. So here ends up being my cybernetics core popping out. And there's my warp gate coming in. It's not quite when I want to have it. It's getting a little bit close. See, we're going to see him warp in, and he's going to finish at around 5 minutes and 45 seconds. This is a little close for my comfort. I'm not the biggest fan of this. Now, to discuss deviation, we've focused almost exclusively on opening and all the little tweaks along the path. But part of me feels like the chrono boost that I spent on this immortal would better be spent on another chrono boost on the cybernetics core to get my sentry out a little bit earlier. I don't need an ultra fast immortal because this immortal is supposed to be timed for a 4 warp gate in the original 140-second warp gate patch, not in this current 160-second warp gate patch. So I haven't worked out all the specific details on that. But what we're going to see in the next little bit of time, I'm terrible and I rallied to the wrong side. I would prefer to rally to the front. Yep, see, we're going to see another sentry pop out. And I'm going to end up with this very nice little force of these 2 sentries here. And this is generally when your 4 warp gate hits, generally maybe around 550 if he's going crazy. And this is going to be fantastic for dealing with most anything. You can easily force field and isolate with the immortal. You're going to have a second immortal out very, very early on. I'm building myself additional pylons, and there's another chrono boost that's going to go down on an immortal. Again, it's going to be perfectly efficient. We're going to have 100% of the chrono boost devoted to that little cutie patootie. And another thing to note at this point in time, it's actually correct to hang out a little bit and wait till you have 100 gas to warp in a 4th sentry. That is something that's going to crop up a lot if you're under pressure. If you're not under pressure, it's fine to build another zealot. And now, suddenly, I'm going to go back to making probes. And notice that I'm at 6 minutes and 32 seconds. This is quite early in the game to go back to making probes if I'm up against a crazy 4 warp gator. But I, incidentally, just have the money to do that. I could build another immortal. You don't need to go hog wild with the immortals. 3 will be more than enough for a 4 warp gate. Way more than enough. But that build ends up being very, very nice because now all of a sudden, thinking about my guiding principles, I don't have this gateway 3 and 4. So that means, wow, that's 300 minerals that he's losing because he can't produce out of gateways 3 and 4 nonstop, all opening. So that's a little advantage I have. I also have this second geyser down that went down quite early. Not super early, but quite early. And I have the advantage of my Robotech being done. Very frequently, when I do this opening, I will get an observer right after my second immortal and go back to my probe production. If he does see that you're doing this, he won't see it that early because of the fact that you chrono boost your stalker so early on. If he does go for a Stargate very, very quickly, you can actually end up getting plenty of stalkers up in time and you'll be in great shape. It cold smashes a ton of openings, and in terms of following it up, there's a lot of leeway. You can expand right away. You can do like this 2 immortal mini gateway expand. You can start adding on more gateways. You can expand and go for blink. You can straight go for blink and push with immortals and blinks. One of my personal favorite is to do go straight for Colossus with no range. Very, very, very early timings. The Colossus no range zealot push because you have 2 immortals. Then you're going to have 2 Colossi and a bunch of gateway units about a minute and a half earlier than your normal no range Colossus push, which is ridiculous, which is so great. But you're noticing that at the start it was this very, very, very thin-ass timing because of the fact that each little thing was just like so narrowly lining up barely with everything. You're probably noticing things like I don't really get to scout. You can actually scout after you build like the one of your later buildings, like after Cybernetics Core, but you have to be careful because around 4 minutes and 15 seconds is when his Stalker will pop out if he's doing a typical opening. So you, the number one thing that I'm always looking for with this is what's his gas timing like? Or not his gas timing, what's his Chrono Boost timing like? What's the purple on his Nexus? If there's a lot of purple there, probably going to be some early Warp Gate pressure, probably going to have to rely on my thin defense timing and a lot of just cold building Immortals and Sentries until I'm comfortable. If he's not, then you can easily not make as many Sentries and begin, you know, maybe even getting a support bay for Colossus earlier on. Personally, I don't really do that much deviation before the second Immortal, because getting 2 Immortals that quickly when you have 2 Gateways and 1 Robo, I mean, it's such an efficient mixture of buildings that it's going to be great. So what we're going to look at now is we're going to look at Tyler is taking this build and he's going to improve upon it in a number of ways. He's used this in a couple of tournaments. We're going to look at his game that happened on Shattered Temple. Let's go into it. And I guess the immediate thing that I want to note is oh yeah, this build only on a map that has, mute my phone, only on a map that has a ramp. Really important that you have that ramp so you can do that, do all that fancy goodness with the force fielding, because you will need force field Immortals to hold off the early rushes. So here we have Liquid Tyler at the top. We have OGS MC at the right. Let's go ahead and pop open the production tab. There's the early Chrono Boost. There's going to be a number of decisions that are going to happen here. There's going to be the same guiding principle about this very leanness in the build. We're also going to see a couple of deviations based upon the newness of the patch and that influence, but a lot of the same principles from the opening. There's going to be some stuff I even dislike here. I'll be like, ooh, Tyler, I don't know about that. And by the way, notice that Tyler actually has 50 more minerals. It's actually easier to see when their foods aren't even. Yep, see, like this moment right here, both of them are building a pylon. Tyler has a little bit more minerals. Little teensy bit. You know, I actually personally don't know if it's better to do a 10 pylon with a pre-Chrono Boost every time, but it's definitely better if you want to get an early gateway out. So there's Tyler's early gateway. Again, notice no early Chrono Boosting. Yeah, OGSMC is doing some stuff over here. I'm not that worried about it. And there's the assimilator going down, and then we're going to see the probe Chrono Boost. Yep. Just as was before, right now it is matching what we have just demonstrated to the T. Nice, solid, basic little opening. We're going to see Tyler trying to get that robotics facility out very quickly, but Tyler has actually had a lot more experience in the field with this than I have. This is a build that I've done a lot in the little Day 9 testing chamber where I have my friends to, you know, I'd go to them and say, hey, 4 warp get me. Like, Tyler was my main 4 warp gate practice, where I'd say, just keep doing this to me, because Tyler has basically a near perfect 4 warp gate. But we're seeing him do a 3rd Chrono Boost on the probes. I don't normally do that. This is, I think, a pretty sensible adjustment, because if you think about it, with the warp gates being a lot slower, you can sneak in some extra probes. It's a full 20 seconds shorter. So we're now seeing Tyler continue to build some guys, and he's sending a probe out. I think this is quite logical. If we're going to Chrono Boost to give ourselves a little bit of extra money early on, we may as well scout to lose a little bit of extra money. So right now we're about even. The longer the scout probe is out, the more I'm getting worried. This is a very important component to the build, this pylon here, because we're warping in sentries with Immortals to hold off our ramp, and we're going to have extremely, extremely close calls every time against the push. I don't mean close calls as in it's a coin flip. We will hold it off 100% of the time, but we have to make sure that we're warping in on the field. If we're warping in, we have to walk for maybe another 3 seconds. It won't be enough. So he's attacking the pylon. I could probably times 2 it, but I'm simply not going to. Because this is my Steal This Build series. There's the Stalker, there's the Gateway, and we're going to see Tyler just Chrono Boost the Stalker. He's reached in here, he sees that there's a lot of Chrono Boost on there. I will say, generally, when a player pops in here and scouts you with a Cybernetics Core this early, he's going to go into panic mode and go, whoa, gotta Chrono Boost my Warp Gate like crazy! Very, very frequently he'll end up doing this. And let me note a subtle difference. He generally is going to respond in this fashion. And what I don't want you to fall for is I don't want you to think, oh, this build should make him go for a really early Warp Gate. It's something that you have to account for. If he's Chrono Boosting all that Warp Gate early on, you can immediately put him in the bucket of someone who's probably going really, really aggressive. And even if he's not being really aggressive, he's eating into his own economy from doing this. But don't expect him to Chrono Boost like crazy. A lot of people will see this and have some other method to deal with the Warp Gate they think you're doing sort of play, right? So don't convince yourself that this is always going to happen. It's going to happen a lot. Because people will not quite understand what you're doing. But notice again, Tyler, who Chrono Boosted out the Stalker. There's our second assimilator. The Stalker suddenly is helping to put OGS MC in the dark, because MC doesn't want to lose this probe for free. And what we're seeing here is the... yeah, there it is. There's our very early Robo. Tyler with a kind of crazy rally. Now, note right now that we are currently at 19 probes. And when this one finishes, we will be at 20 probes. And that is the usual stopping point. We're seeing MC actually continue to build probes. But again, what's the edge we're going for with this build? The edge is not probe advantage. It's having a little more gas than him, and it's having a little bit more tech than he does, getting this Robo out earlier, and having a much leaner build. Here is the very early pylon that seems weird, but allows us to continue to build stuff. Tyler's actually continuing to build probes. This is one interesting adjustment, where apparently upon scouting his opponent, what does Tyler actually see? He sees... nope, did not actually get the biggest amount of information out of this, but either way, Tyler was a bully with his initial Stalker. And there we're seeing some Chrono Boost start to get spent on that Cybernetics Core. I'm always quite leery of early pressure. That's why I Chrono Boost my own Cybernetics Core so much. We're going to see some great decisions happen here by Tyler. He's actually getting a Sentry. He's getting a Sentry pre-Gateway. You saw me get this post-Gateway. And now he's getting an Immortal pre-Gateway. Where's the second Gateway gone? Where has it gone, alright? I want you to think, where did this go? This kind of relates back to this ultra-thin logic that I was talking about earlier. Where is it? Where did that little gateway go? Because, in fact, when I first did this opening, I thought you didn't have room for a second gateway. As I demonstrated right before this, you do have room for a second gateway, damn it. But here, where'd it go? Oh, I think I know. That's right. Liquid Tyler spent it on extra probes. Look at this. He has an extra probe in there. And he lost about 50 minerals sending that probe out to mine. So you see the 50 minerals on this probe plus the 50 minerals to scout is 150 minerals. Ladies and gentlemen, I have found the missing gateway. Is this good? Is this bad? Well, you know what? Tyler is actually just slightly nudging all the pieces back of this build. And if we look, yeah, it looks like, OGS MCU had a good amount saved up. Yeah, like he could have had this 20 seconds later. This could have been at 136 seconds if he had Chrono Boosted twice. But it looks like, yeah, Tyler's timing is actually going to line up quite nicely. Notice how it's using the same overall principles as what I was discussing. However, the opening is slightly different based upon what Tyler scouted and based upon the changes in this patch. Now, this is a weird as hell spot to spot. Weird as hell opening to spot. It's a weird spot to spot. Not what I meant to say. We're seeing Tyler's timing line up quite nicely. And look at this. He's gone back to probe production quite a bit earlier than in my variation. Also, he even has a little bit of Chrono Boost up, which I think he could have used to get this, this little Warp Gate up a smidge quicker. But here is going to come, I think, a quite important deviation that Tyler is going to be doing. He's not getting all these sentries. Do you see how in my build I was getting a ridiculous ton of sentries early on? He's not doing that. He's recognizing we're at 6 minutes and 18 seconds. Where's the 4 warp gate? Notice that he can warp in a sentry. In a second he's going to be able to warp in a 3rd sentry, but he's just waiting. Around 5 minutes and 45 seconds is when 4 warp gates really start to kick into high gear, especially if they're doing a kind of crazy variant. Around 6 minutes is when your typical, this is post-patch, is when your typical 4 warp gate's going to begin coming. And now we're at 6 minutes and 18 seconds, and we're not really seeing anything. If Tyler did start to see some pressure, he can throw down a force field. Force fields last 15 seconds. That's going to be enough for him to warp in another sentry and another sentry, and then he will have enough energy from the original sentry to get himself a 4th force field. So you're starting to see that there's this weird period of what is he doing? But Tyler is recognizing what MC is doing based upon nothing. It's a very, very important trigger in StarCraft 2. If the aggressive attack should begin at 6 minutes, and now it's 6 minutes and 15 seconds, he must conclusively not be doing that attack. And I know some of you are thinking, well, what if he's doing that, but he's just waiting 20 seconds? Okay, yeah, then he's doing a shitty attack, right? But the scary attack that you really need to account for and make all sorts of readjustments to, that happens at 6 minutes. 6 minutes and 10 seconds. Starting to really think it's not going to happen. 6 minutes and 20 seconds, it ain't happening. So all this waiting and biding of time is really, really, really working out for Tyler. So he's getting his 2nd Immortal out. Now, if we pop back over to OGS MC Town, he's getting his own warp gates up. You notice Tyler has his warp gates up much, much, much earlier, because Tyler is going for the 10 pylon, 10 gate, 15 core. And now, finally, after waiting, let me actually just illustrate this one more time. We are currently at 140 minerals. We could warp in a Stalker. We could warp in a Stalker. We could warp in a unit. We're not. We could warp in a unit. We're not. We could warp in units. We're not doing that. We could warp in units. We're not doing that. We could still warp in units. And we're really not doing that. But Tyler, again, is waiting till 6 minutes and 36 seconds and recognizing, yep, no push coming. So rather than build all these defensive-oriented sentries, suddenly we're going to see Tyler explode forward and begin making a lot of Stalkers. Brilliant adjustment by Tyler. Absolutely brilliant. Remember that guiding principle I mentioned? Where we wanted these lean set of buildings constantly producing, preventing, or rather than building like gateways 3 and 4 early, which would have prevented us from doing much of anything. We have all these gateways and robos that are constantly going to use. This robo has been churning units out since it popped up at the 5 minute and 5 second mark, right? It has been a very, very busy bear. Was it 5 minutes and 5 seconds? I think I got that wrong. I think the first, no, it should be 5 minutes and 5 seconds. I actually want to check that out. Is that right? Is it 5 minutes? Hey, I'm so good. Yeah, look at it popping up. Bam! 5 minutes and 5 seconds. Goodness, I'm cool. Alright, anyways, popping back up. So, what on earth was I talking about? Yeah, we have these very lean buildings. Or a very lean building mixture. We've even been able to begin making probes again. OGSMC was using the same logic and trying to sneak away with a lot of probes. He's going for a probe advantage. This build is not necessarily going for a probe advantage, but we are going for a tech advantage. We actually have a little bit of a lead on gas. We have 1940 from there, 2204 from here, and then we have a little bit more in there, a little bit more in there. Yeah, so MC is actually behind in the gas count. And we're doing quite well for ourselves here. So, Tyler is going to move out, and he's going to be doing an aggressive variant. He's actually going to be getting these 3 warp gates very, very quickly. And he's going to begin morphing a bunch of Stalkers in on the low ground, excuse me. And he's going to begin marching his way forward for a push. Now, interestingly, there's this sort of goofy game that happens in Protoss vs. Protoss where a lot of times people are doing almost identical things, and it's almost like the player who makes the first observer loses. Like, have you ever seen 2 people who are both going Colossi, but one of them builds an observer just to check up, or one of them builds an immortal for defense, and then the other one just doesn't build anything for defense, and then the person who built the immortal or built the observer is behind, and the person who sort of riskily did nothing is way ahead. I hate that game. I do not like that. This build is great for dealing with this, because we get these two awesome power units out, the Immortal, so fast that we can even get the Observer up and still have plenty of money left over to be able to morph in a bunch more units. So now we're seeing MC do a very defense-minded play. He's even getting his Twilight Council. He's trying to get another OBS out. But Tyler has such a strong, beefy unit mix. Thanks to that ultra-early robotics facility. Started out as a defensive play, but we got it so early so that way we could begin putting pressure on really early on. Ain't this purty? Ain't this just purty? Oh yes. I don't know who's throwing down these force fields. It's got to be Tyler. Doing his sort of craziness, but yeah, I mean, Immortals are just so good against Stalkers. And before this battle began, we both had the same amount of Stalkers. I mean, did Tyler actually have more? I mean, I would not be surprised if Tyler had more. I mean, there's 6 and 6. Yeah, Tyler actually had 7. And if you imagine for a moment, pretend this Nexus isn't here, right? Pretend this isn't here. Well, gee, that's another 400 there. So yeah, you know, we could maybe have 9 or 10 Stalkers as OGS MC. Still struggling versus composition. A lot. Many will say, oh, if MC hadn't built the Nexus, he would have been fine. No, not exactly. I mean, it wouldn't have been a walkover for Tyler, but it definitely would have been rough for Tyler. Or, excuse me, rough for MC. I mean, hell, 10 Stalkers against 7 Stalkers and 2 Immortals. Oh, my God. Immortals just kill Stalkers so fast, so we're going to see Tyler move in for a quick and easy kill. I'm just going to keep drinking myself a little bit of liquid while this action's going on, because I'm sure all of you know exactly how this is going to turn out. GG! Yippity! That's right. So that's going to wrap up Steal This Build number 4. I want to briefly review everything that we just saw. We spent a lot talking about the thinness of an opening, right? Where we had this problem. How do we stop before a warp gate? We had a proposed solution. We worked it and worked it and worked it and worked it and worked it. And what we saw was a very thin build that looked very weird. But it had a very clear guiding principle to it, which helped not only in the gameplay, like within a game, I know where I'm going, but also as I'm practicing and making changes, I know what I'm trying to help make the changes do. I'm trying to help it get to this 2 Gateway 1 Immortal mixture. Excuse me, 2 Gateway 1 Robotics Facility mixture. And we got the chance to see Tyler make a couple little deviations in there. All right, that looked good. But we note, I think the most important thing is that despite the weirdness of the opening, what we see is this push that looks like a really typically strong Protoss versus Protoss push. Some Immortals and some Stalkers, very ordinary, but it's happening minutes earlier than it ordinarily does because of our clever opening. So, figured I'd throw that one out at you. Always feel free to spend a lot of games refining. To reiterate, the build that I presented in the first game took me 20 to 25 hours of just reloading and reloading and reloading and reloading and reloading and reloading. It took me a Thursday through a Sunday night of working on it in between work to really crack that puzzle. But once it's cracked, it's like, holy, oh my God, we're suddenly opened up into this new realm of Protoss versus Protoss that's just beautiful. So with that, I'm going to wrap this one up and go back to recording more Steal This Build series. With that, I'm Day9. Peace out.